I started to research this thinking, oh, hit squads in London. What do they, once a decade, they fly over to London and they cause some trouble? I had no idea just the scope and scale of Iranian operations in just this one major world city, but just one city. It's really something.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, earlier this year, the head of MI5, our domestic security service, made a public announcement that MI5 had thwarted at least 10 Iranian assassination attempts recently. I personally think that number is probably downplayed. I think it's probably a lot more. But as you say, the activity of Iranian's intelligence services, including assassination attempts within the UK and particularly London, I mean, it is a very, very busy sphere of operations for them, but not just limited to London or the UK. It's other parts of the world, the US included.
Really? What I know, well, first of all, any other cities in the UK come to mind? Because I sort of thought this was relegated mostly to London, where a lot of the Iranian dissidents probably live. But I guess if they live in Bristol, there's agents in Bristol.
Yeah, they'll go wherever they need to go. Without getting into detail, there have been other cases that are elsewhere within the UK where there's been credible threats, very, very credible threats to life. As with the work that I used to do, on the flip side, Iranian agents, operatives will go wherever they need to go. So if there is somebody in Bristol or wherever, they'll get on a train or whatever and go there.
And you said they're also operating in the United States. I assume we have Iranian dissidents in Los Angeles. Does that mean that then there's potentially Iranian hit squads operating out of Beverly Hills and LA? Because that's kind of terrifying.
The answer to that is yes. And there has been public information that's been revealed about very credible threats within the United States. Yes, it is Iranian diaspora, wherever they are, including on the west coast of America, and Iranian death squads have gone to those places with the sole intention of committing an assassination. Thankfully, their actions have been thwarted so far, but there's a lot of activity. And it's a broader wall for Iran. And in the case of the United States, it's important to note that a very key figure, and this is in 2020, a very key figure within the Iranian regime, a general called Qasem Soleimani, was assassinated by a drone attack by the United States. As a result of that, Iranian death squads are on the warpath and want revenge. And that means they will be very brazen, and they will go onto US soil to avenge their leader.
So tell me a little bit about the Soleimani guy, because I know that he was assassinated by drone. I know a lot of people were like, oh, why did we do that? And that was kind of a strange thing to hear, right? You know, if you see Osama bin Laden, the first thing you want to do is grab him or kill him. This guy was different, even though he was also responsible for the death of lots of Americans, American servicemen, and civilians in other countries through his actions. But was it just a bridge too far to take this guy out, or was it more of, hey, at least we know where he is and maybe what he's doing, and now we don't because we killed him?
Well, it's the same old conundrum, building on what you've just said there, which is, do you leave someone in situ and try to get information, or do you ultimately get to the point of thinking, let's take him out? With the case of Soleimani, it was the latter, because he had been a very powerful figure within what's called the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is, as the name suggests, the religious army within Iran. He was not only a very senior figure within that, but also he was head of what's called the Quds Force, which is an organization within the IRGC. And the Quds Force its remit is to export terrorism overseas and conduct assassinations. Now, this was the guy that was running that unit. He'd been doing it for a very long time. There was no way at all that he could have been recruited, for example, by Western intelligence services to spy on his patch. No way at all. So ultimately, the decision was taken, okay, via a drone strike, as you mentioned, in Baghdad. Let's neutralize him. Now, of course, that always begs the question, as it always does in these situations, are the repercussions worth it? But obviously, that was carefully considered prior to the drone strike.
Yeah, one would hope. What's weird about Iran that I don't totally understand, and I think a number of listeners probably share this confusion, is what do you mean IRGC religious army? Isn't that just the army of Iran? But Iran actually has what, regular military forces, and then there's a separate religious military force that's essentially just for the regime. So there's like there's like an army like we have in the United States that's ostensibly for the whole country, but Iran also has just regime police and military that only work to keep the current regime in power. Is that accurate?
That is, precisely the case. It is the structure of Iran, both militarily but also politically, is somewhat, not entirely complex, but it is somewhat complex. And it is shifting sands. But essentially, to keep it very comprehensible, there are three real power bases within Iran. One is the conservative religious leadership. The second is the political, which is spearheaded by the president of Iran. And the third is the judiciary. And for people like me, when I was in MI6, one of the constant problems when looking at Iran was trying to ascertain who was in ascendancy, who was really pulling the strings. And it could vary between those three pillars, as I've described them. The religious army, the IRGC, and also the religious police come directly under the leadership of the conservative leader, the Ayatollah. He controls them. The president of Iran does not control the likes of the IRGC or within it the Quds Force or indeed the religious police. So that is a massive, massive weapon that Iran's conservative religious leadership have. And it's a vast army. It's probably, in terms of capability, it's probably the most meaningful military aspect they have. So it's not just a small bunch of fanatics. This is an army they will use to defend their borders and invade others if necessary.